Session number 13 in Adobe Illustrator, and we're continuing our character part series here, and today is about head shapes, noses, and ears. And you're looking at something that I put together just kind of as a little preview here. I've got several different head shapes, some noses, some ears, and across the bottom there I put some ideas that if you were thinking about creating animal characters, that you can use the Pathfinder and some other options in Adobe Illustrator to make heads that work well for animals as well. But your assignment today is going to be to create 3 head shapes, 3 noses, and 3 ears. Now when you do ears, you don't have to necessarily make both of them. You can just do 1 ear. That would be fine. And you know, the logic tells you that when you're really designing a character, you can make 1 ear, and then you can do the whole alt drag and reflect thing, and you can have 2 ears very easily. In fact, you may want to go ahead and do that today, but 3 sets, 3, 3, and 3 is the rule of the day. 3 heads, 3 noses, and 3 ear styles, 3 ear designs. And what you'll have to do to get started is make a new artboard. So when you're in Illustrator, you're going to click File, you're going to click New, and you'll decide on your orientation. All right, pick the one you want, click OK, and you're off and running. Now, here's one thing on the, if I go over to, and I got a bunch of panels open here that I'm going to get rid of. If I go over to the Swatches panel and click the Options button and go to Open Swatch Library, these swatches that we have here are really pretty useful for a lot of drawings and things that you might wind up doing. And one of the swatch collections here says skin tones. So I'm going to open that up and just kind of keep it handy here, and I'll pull it down so you can see it a little bit more. But it has several different colors here that would make decent skin tones, and since you're doing things like heads and ears and stuff like that, you might want to open it up and use those as fill colors for what you're doing. Now, head shapes can be as simple as, you know, just like kind of an oblong oval, something like this, and I might you know, give that some kind of fill color there and bump up the stroke a little bit. You know, that's awfully easy, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. Now let me take that one step farther here and show you something else that you can do, and I'm kind of looking back at some of my other examples here. If I go back to the oval tool, and I make a little bit more of a round kind of thing, and then take the white arrow, not the black arrow, but the white arrow, and I'm going to grab, see, I'm going to drag and grab that bottom handle right here and just pull it down. And you see the difference in the shape that I get there? And again, it just depends on what you want the character to look like. By using the white arrow and grabbing that one handle, I was able to make a little bit more of like an egg shape kind of thing, and occasionally, you know, that's a good thing for, maybe I'll shorten that up just a little bit, but that might be the kind of head shape that you want. Here's another possibility. I might do a rounded rectangle, something like this. And then again, I could take that white arrow tool, and there's 2 anchors on this corner, so I'm going to grab them and move them in this way. And as I slide them in toward the center, you see what it does. It slants that. It's like kind of like a jawline. And if I do the same thing on the other side, I select these 2 anchor points that are over here, and then I just click them and slide them in toward the center. You know, I wind up with a head shape that looks something like that. So I'm getting some head shapes here that are kind of interesting. Another way you could go, and you only have to do 3 here, but I could also, you know, I could do that whole, I could do the polygon tool and tap the down arrow, and I could get a triangle. All right, so that gives me kind of a triangle shape. But then I could go, we've learned about this, I could go to Effect and Stylize and Round Corners, and really round the corners a lot. Let me preview that and round the corners quite a bit. And again, I'm getting kind of a head shape there that isn't terrible. That's not bad. So actually I have 4. I didn't have to make 4, but I was just showing you possible ideas. So I want you to try some of those or see what you can come up with. Maybe you'll come up with something a little bit different than what I did. But those are head shapes that we could use. I'll just take a paintbrush and kind of okay, those are my head shapes right there. Alright, now I'm going to get into noses here a little bit, and you can see some of the kinds of things that I did over here. And the one trick that I want to show you here, the noses, I don't make very complicated noses, but the one trick that I do want to show you, and it really kind of has to do with using this Paintbrush Tool. The Paintbrush Tool I think is great for like when you're freehanding and you're working on something like this. You can just kind of come down and just kind of hook that around like that. And then with a shape like that, you can select it and then say, okay, you know what, I want that. It doesn't have a fill right now. It's an open path. It doesn't have a fill. You can just kind of come along and say, I want that to have a fill. All right, and then if you put that like on top of a head that is that same color, then it just kind of blends right in and it looks like a nose. Now you can also, kind of paint in little accent corners like that, and that doesn't hurt anything when you do that. And if you add in a little extra like that, it might not be a bad idea to select it and go to Object and go to Group, and that way you've got it so it's all together. Similar thing here. You can make kind of the pig nose kind of looking thing. Don't have to fill that in all the way. That's an open path, but then I can come along and say, okay, I want that to have a fill color. So I click there, and that fills that in. And then, of course, you could come along with the circle tool or something similar here and make a small circle. I'm going to fill that with black real quick. Use my black arrow tool and stick that right there and alt drag one of those, and you wind up, that's kind of a little snub nose, pig nose kind of thing. And again, because of those black circles being separate objects, I'm going to select those and go to Object and go to Group, and those are all grouped together now. All right, so that's a different style of nose. All right, and again, lots and lots of possibilities. Here's another, this wavy looking kind of thing. You'll see this in cartoons sometimes, where I just take the paintbrush and I kind of come down and a little kind of a bump here, and then back around like that. And again, I'm not going to close that shape, and Illustrator kind of smooths your lines out when you use that paintbrush a little bit, which is kind of nice. I always need that help. And if I click a fill color for that, it just fills it in, even though it's not a closed shape. And again, not a bad looking kind of arrangement I've got there. And I could, if I really wanted to, I could kind of make a little kind of a flat oval that is filled with black, and I could take my arrow and kind of park that right in there and give that nostril area a little extra depth. I could do the same kind of thing over here, just drop it in there, and so again, it looks a little bit, there's a little more detail to that, a little more depth to that. All right, so we've got some nose styles. Lovely. All right, now ears, again, similar kind of approach here. I'm going to do a lot of using the paintbrush and just kind of getting a basic outline and then filling it up and then adding some detail. And really the big thing here when you're doing ears is, again, I'm going to start with the paintbrush and just kind of draw a basic shape, kind of like that. And I want to add a fill color to that, so I'll go ahead and do that. But the thing that makes a difference in ears is just taking like a paintbrush or whatever tool you feel most comfortable with, and kind of putting a little detail inside it, something like that, and all of a sudden it gets a lot better. Now I don't know if you really like the way that looks, but having some detail inside the ear just makes it really stand out. It looks much better when you do that. Now if you're going to have an ear that's made out of a couple of different pieces here, again, it's a good idea to drag it and go to Object and go to Group, and that way that ear always stays together. And to demonstrate that idea that I was talking about earlier, I can alt drag that and right click, transform and reflect, and it's previewing for me, so I'll say OK there. And you can kind of see that and it, when you're doing this today, if you feel like, well, I want to see what that looks like on a head, well, then draw yourself a head shape and fill it, fill it with maybe a skin tone or something. And his ears are really big, but you get the idea. All right, so that's one set of ears, and I would have to finish this off, I'd have to do a couple more sets of ears. And you see the ones that I did here, I just did them, and you could do them with the pen tool. You could take the pen tool here and kind of go click and click and click and click, and there, go get the black arrow, maybe bump that stroke up just a little bit. And again, I always think it's a good idea to do a little detail inside the ear of some kind. You can group that together, Object, Group, and that's another ear style right there. All right. So, you're getting the idea. I don't know that I need to draw another ear. You can see I did one that's gauged right here, and I did kind of a real pointy Vulcan ear. I did that with the pen tool. So again, your goal here today is come up with 3 heads, 3 noses, and 3 ear styles. Whether or not you have a whole set of ears is really kind of up to you, but 3 ear styles. And once you get that done, you're going to go File, and you're going to go Save As. And again, I am not connected to my Drive H right now, but you would go to Drive H, and this would be called head. Just think about the things you made: head, nose, ear. All right, head, nose, ear. And save that on Drive H, and then of course drag and drop your finished file to Drive L in the Turn In folder. All right, hey, that's another session in the books here. So let's have at it.